My name is Isabella Sinclair, and I'm 31 years old. For the past 15 years, I've been the backbone of my family's construction business, while my younger sister Natalie was treated like the golden child who could do no wrong. I learned every aspect of the business from the ground up, from reading blueprints to managing million-dollar projects, while she partied through college on our parents' dime. But when my parents announced they were handing over the CEO position to Natalie instead of me, calling me just not leadership material, something inside me finally snapped. What happened next didn't just expose their terrible judgment, it revealed a secret that would destroy their company and leave them begging for my help. Before I tell you how I went from being the invisible workhorse to watching my family's empire crumble without me, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy stories about justice being served. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to that cold February morning when everything changed forever. I was in my downtown office, reviewing contractor bids for a $3.2 million residential development when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Dad, and I could already feel my stomach tighten. In our family, calls from Richard Sinclair never brought good news, at least not for me. "Isabella, family meeting tonight at 7, my father said without preamble, his voice carrying that familiar tone of authority that had intimidated me for years. "Don't be late." I glanced at my calendar, where I'd blocked out the evening to review proposals for what could be the biggest project of my career. "Dad, I have work to finish." "This is more important than whatever you're doing," he cut me off. "Your mother and I have big news. Natalie's flying in from Miami." Of course, Natalie was involved. My 28-year-old sister, who'd spent the last 3 years in Florida supposedly finding herself after her communications degree, while I'd been running the day-to-day operations of Sinclair Construction. "What's this about?" "You'll find out tonight. 7 sharp, Isabella, don't disappoint us." The line went dead, and I stared at my phone, that familiar knot of anxiety forming in my chest. 20 years of "don't disappoint us," and I still felt like a 16-year-old trying to prove herself worthy of basic recognition. I looked around my cramped office above the downtown coffee shop, not exactly prestigious, but it was mine. The walls were covered with blueprints and project timelines for the independent consulting work I'd been building on the side. Work my family knew nothing about because they'd never bothered to ask what I did with my evenings and weekends. For 15 years, I'd given everything to Sinclair Construction. I'd started working there the summer I turned 16, learning from the ground up. While my friends were at the beach, I was on construction sites wearing steel-toed boots and a hard hat that was always too big. While Natalie was getting manicures and going to parties, I was studying structural engineering at night school and learning to read architectural drawings. I'd earned my construction management certificate, my OSHA certifications, even my contractor's license, all while working full-time for the family business. I knew every subcontractor, every supplier, every client we'd ever worked with. I could tell you the profit margin on any job from the past 5 years off the top of my head. But somehow, I was never quite enough. The drive to my parents' house in Westchester took 45 minutes, giving me plenty of time to remember all the ways I'd been systematically overlooked. Like when I'd saved the Morrison project by catching a structural engineer's error that would have cost us $200,000, and my father had credited it to good teamwork. Or when I'd brought in the Henderson account, our biggest client, and my mother had said, "Lucky break, honey. Right place, right time." The house looked exactly the same as always. Imposing stone facade, perfectly manicured lawn, 3-car garage housing my father's BMW, my mother's Mercedes, and the empty space where Natalie's car should be when she wasn't off exploring her options. I walked through the front door without knocking, as I had for 31 years, and found them all in the formal living room. My parents sat on their usual spots on the leather sofa, and Natalie perched on the armchair like a princess holding court. She looked tan and relaxed, her blonde hair styled in beachy waves that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Isabella," Natalie jumped up and hugged me, her designer perfume overwhelming. "You look tired. Are you getting enough sleep?" The concern was fake, but the observation was accurate. I'd been working 12-hour days trying to manage my consulting clients, while still handling my responsibilities at Sinclair Construction. I'm fine, I said, taking my usual spot on the love seat, always slightly separated from the family unit. My father cleared his throat importantly. Girls, your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking about the future of Sinclair Construction. Here it comes, I thought, my heart beginning to race. The industry is changing, my mother, Patricia, chimed in. We need fresh energy, new ideas, someone who can bring us into the modern era. I nodded, hoping this was finally it, finally my moment. 15 years of proving myself, and they were going to acknowledge what everyone in the industry already knew, that I was the one keeping this company running. Which is why, my father continued, we've decided to make Natalie our new CEO. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt dizzy for a moment, like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. What? I managed to whisper. Natalie was beaming, practically glowing with excitement. Isn't it amazing? Mom and Dad think I have the perfect skill set to modernize the brand. My communications background, my social media expertise. Social media expertise? I interrupted, my voice cracking. Natalie, you've posted vacation photos and restaurant reviews. What do you know about construction? My father's expression hardened. Isabella, this is exactly the kind of negative attitude we're trying to move away from. Negative attitude? I stood up, my hands shaking. Dad, I've been working for this company since I was 16. I know every aspect of this business. I have the certifications, the relationships, the experience. But you don't have the vision, my mother said gently, as if she were explaining something obvious to a slow child. Natalie has charisma. She's modern, tech-savvy, appealing to younger demographics. I've brought in 60% of our new business in the past 3 years. As part of the team, my father said firmly, but leadership requires different skills. Natalie has that spark, that ability to inspire people and sell our vision. I looked at my sister, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to speak up for me. What vision? I asked. What's her plan for the company? Natalie cleared her throat and stood up, suddenly animated. I'm so glad you asked. I want to rebrand us as Sinclair and Associates, much more modern, right? We'll focus on luxury residential projects, really high-end stuff. Instagram-worthy homes that people will want to photograph and share. I stared at her in disbelief. Instagram-worthy? Natalie, construction isn't about getting likes. It's about structural integrity, building codes, safety regulations. See, my father interrupted. This is exactly what I mean. You're stuck in the old way of thinking, Isabella. You focus on the technical stuff, but you miss the bigger picture. The technical stuff keeps buildings from falling down. And the marketing brings in the clients who pay for those buildings, my mother added. Honey, you're valuable to us, don't get me wrong. We need your skills, but in a support role. A support role. After 15 years of being the backbone of this company, they wanted me in a support role. What exactly does that mean? I asked quietly. You'll be Natalie's right hand, my father said enthusiastically, as if he were offering me a promotion. Project manager, handling all the detailed work so she can focus on strategy and client relations. So I'll do all the work while she gets all the credit. Isabella, my mother's voice took on that warning tone I remembered from childhood. This is a family decision. We need you to support your sister. I looked around the room at the 3 people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My father, who I'd idolized growing up, watching him build something from nothing. My mother, who'd taught me that hard work and dedication were the most important virtues. My sister, who I'd protected and covered for countless times over the years. What if I don't want to be in a support role? I asked. The silence was deafening. Finally, my father spoke. Then maybe you need to think about whether Sinclair Construction is the right place for you. It wasn't a question, it was a threat. Natalie finally found her voice. Bella, please don't make this harder than it has to be. We're family. We should be celebrating together. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. Celebrating what? The fact that you're being handed a company you know nothing about? Or the fact that 15 years of my life apparently count for nothing? You're being dramatic, my mother sighed. This is business, Isabella, it's not personal. But it was personal. It was the most personal thing in the world. I walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. When do you plan to announce this? Monday morning, my father said. We're calling a company meeting. Monday morning. 3 days to process the fact that my entire career, my entire identity, had just been rearranged without my input. I need some time to think, I said. Of course, Natalie said brightly. Take all the time you need, but I'm really excited to work together as a team. I left without saying goodbye. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of tears and rage. 15 years. 15 years of giving everything I had to that company, and they just handed it to someone who couldn't tell a level from a plumb line. But as I sat in my living room that night, surrounded by the blueprints and business plans for my consulting work, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but underneath it, a cold determination was building. They wanted to see what Sinclair Construction looked like without me. They were about to find out. And they were going to regret every single word they'd said tonight. If you've ever been passed over for something you deserved, or had your worth dismissed by people who should have valued you, you'll understand what happened next. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated by family? I want to hear your stories. And if this resonates with you, please subscribe. We're building a community of people who refuse to be invisible. Now, let me tell you about the Monday morning that changed everything. I arrived at Sinclair Construction at 7 a.m., 2 hours before the company meeting where my demotion would be announced. I had work to do, not for them, but for myself. I spent those 2 hours quietly, methodically, copying files. Not stealing, I would never do anything unethical, but copying information I had every legal right to access. Client contact information I'd personally cultivated. Project timelines I'd created. Supplier relationships I'd built. Subcontractor contacts who knew and trusted me. 15 years of relationships don't belong to a company. They belong to the person who built them. By 9 a.m., I had everything backed up on external drives. By 9:15, the entire staff was gathered in the conference room, 12 employees who'd worked with me for years, who respected my judgment and trusted my leadership. My father stood at the head of the table, looking important in his expensive suit. Natalie sat beside him, practically vibrating with excitement. I took my usual seat at the side of the table, no longer the heir apparent but soon to be demoted to support staff. Everyone, thank you for coming, my father began. Patricia and I have some exciting news to share about the future direction of Sinclair Construction. I watched the faces around the table. Mike, our lead foreman, who taught me how to read blueprints when I was 17. Sarah, our office manager, who'd relied on me to handle the complex scheduling and logistics. Tom, our senior electrician, who came to me with technical problems because he knew I'd understand them. We're promoting Natalie to CEO, effective immediately, my father announced. She brings fresh energy and modern marketing expertise that will take us to the next level. The silence in the room was uncomfortable. I could see the confusion on everyone's faces. They knew Natalie had no construction experience. They knew I'd been the one actually running operations for years. Natalie stood up, all confidence and bright smiles. I'm so excited to lead this team into a new era. We're going to focus on high-end residential projects, really beautiful homes that showcase our craftsmanship. Mike raised his hand tentatively. What about our current commercial contracts? The Patterson office complex is scheduled to break ground next month. Natalie looked momentarily confused, then turned to me. Isabella will handle all those boring technical details. I'll be focusing on strategy and business development. The word boring hung in the air like a slap. Commercial construction contracts worth millions of dollars were boring technical details. Sarah spoke up. Will Isabella still be handling client relations? Because the Henderson Group specifically requested to work with her on their next project. My father jumped in before I could respond. Isabella will continue to support our client relationships, but Natalie will be taking over as the primary point of contact for all major accounts. I watched Tom's face darken. Tom had worked with me on 3 major projects, and I'd saved his company thousands of dollars by catching design flaws before construction began. He knew what my expertise was worth. This is effective immediately, my mother added. We know it's a big change, but we're confident everyone will support Natalie as she grows into this role. The meeting lasted another 20 minutes, with Natalie enthusiastically outlining her vision for Instagram-worthy projects, while the experienced construction workers around the table exchanged increasingly skeptical glances. When it was over, I stayed behind as everyone filed out. Several employees lingered to talk to me privately. Isabella, this doesn't make sense, Mike said quietly. You know this business inside and out. She doesn't know a stud from a joist. It's family politics, I said simply. I'll make it work. But I wouldn't, I already knew I wouldn't. That afternoon, I submitted my 2 weeks' notice. I walked into my father's office and placed the letter on his desk without a word. He read it twice, then looked up at me with genuine surprise. Isabella, you don't mean this. I do. But you can't leave. You're part of this family, part of this business. I was never part of the leadership of this business. You made that very clear. He set the letter down and leaned back in his chair. Look, I know you're upset about the CEO decision, but you're being emotional. Take a few days, think about it. I'm not being emotional, Dad. I'm being practical. Natalie is going to run this company into the ground, and I won't be here to watch it happen. That's not fair to your sister. What's not fair is giving someone with zero experience control of a multi-million-dollar business, while telling the person who actually runs it to take a support role. My father's expression hardened. Isabella, you're good at the technical work, I'll give you that, but you don't have what it takes to be a leader, you never have. Those words hit me harder than anything he'd said at the family meeting. What does that mean? You're not inspiring, you don't have charisma. You're competent, but competent isn't enough at the executive level. I stared at him, this man who'd never bothered to come to a single job site where his employees praised my problem-solving skills, my ability to keep projects on track, my talent for managing difficult clients and unreasonable deadlines. Have you ever asked any of our clients what they think of me? Isabella, have you ever asked Mike or Tom or Sarah what they think of my leadership? That's different, they work for us. They work with me every single day, and they trust me to make decisions that affect their livelihoods. My father stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the construction yard. You're making a mistake, Isabella. You'll never find anything better than what you have here. Maybe not, I said, but I'll find something where I'm valued for what I bring to the table, not dismissed because I don't have the right personality type. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. Dad, when Natalie runs into her first real crisis, and she will, don't call me to fix it. 2 weeks later, I cleaned out my desk while Natalie supervised, offering helpful commentary about what I should take and what belonged to the company. You know, you could still change your mind, she said as I packed my certificates into a box. I really could use your help getting up to speed. I looked at her, so confident in her new role, so certain that everything would work out simply because she wanted it to. Natalie, can you tell me what a load-bearing wall is? She laughed. Isabella, that's what we hire people for. I don't need to know every tiny detail. It's not a tiny detail, it's fundamental to construction. See, this is what I mean. You get so caught up in the technical stuff that you miss the big picture. I sealed the box with tape and picked it up. The big picture is built on technical stuff. When you figure that out, it'll be too late. She was still laughing as I walked out the door. For the first time in 15 years, I was unemployed. And for the first time in my adult life, I was free. I spent exactly 1 day feeling sorry for myself. Then I got to work. The business plan I'd been developing on the side wasn't theoretical anymore. It was my lifeline. Sinclair Construction focused on large residential and commercial projects, but there was a massive gap in the market they'd never bothered to explore. Mid-scale renovations and custom builds for clients who wanted quality work without corporate overhead. I registered my business as Blueprint Construction, deliberately choosing a name that emphasized planning and precision. Within a week, I'd secured a small office space, purchased basic equipment, and started reaching out to the network I'd spent 15 years building. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My first client was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who needed her home modified for accessibility. It was exactly the kind of project Sinclair Construction would never take, too small, not prestigious enough, requiring too much personal attention. It was perfect for me. I spent 3 days with Mrs. Patterson, understanding her needs, designing solutions that would let her age in place safely and comfortably. The project was worth $35,000, modest by my family's standards, but it was mine from start to finish. More importantly, Mrs. Patterson treated me like the expert I was. She listened to my recommendations, trusted my judgment, and paid my invoices without question. When I solved a complicated problem with her staircase, she actually thanked me for my expertise. It had been years since anyone had thanked me for my expertise. Word spread quickly in the industry. Mike, my former foreman at Sinclair, started referring small projects to me, jobs that were beneath Sinclair's notice but perfect for a growing business. Sarah, the office manager, mentioned my name to friends who needed reliable contractors. Within 2 months, I had a waiting list. Within 4 months, I hired my first employee, Tom, the electrician from Sinclair who'd grown frustrated with Natalie's management style. Isabella, he said on the day he gave his notice to join me, working with you is like working with someone who actually understands construction. I forgot what that felt like. Within 6 months, I had 5 employees and was turning down projects. And I hadn't spoken to my family once since the day I left. That changed when my mother called on a Thursday evening in October. Isabella, we need to talk. I was at a job site, reviewing the final walkthrough with a client who just paid me $50,000 for a kitchen renovation that had come in on time and under budget. I'm working, Mom. It's about the family business. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, but this time it was different. This time I had somewhere else to be, something else that mattered more. What about it? We're having some challenges. Your father thinks maybe you could come back, help us through this rough patch. I sat down on the client's new custom-built breakfast nook, work I'd designed and supervised myself. What kind of challenges? Well, Natalie is learning, but some of our clients have been difficult. The Henderson Group canceled their contract. The Patterson office complex is behind schedule. We've had some cost overruns. Cost overruns, behind schedule, canceled contracts, everything I could have predicted and prevented. How far behind schedule? A long pause, 4 months. 4 months on a project that should have taken 8 months total. And the cost overruns. About 30% over budget. I closed my eyes. 30% over budget would wipe out most of their profit margin and potentially trigger penalty clauses in their contracts. Mom, why are you calling me? Your father was wondering if you might consider coming back. As a partner this time, equal footing with Natalie. Equal footing. After 6 months of building my own successful business, they wanted to offer me equal footing with someone who'd nearly destroyed theirs. I'm not interested. Isabella, please, this is your family's legacy. My family made it very clear that I wasn't part of that legacy. We made a mistake, she said quietly. Your father realizes that now. What does Natalie think about bringing me back as an equal partner? Another long pause. She's resistant. She feels like it would undermine her authority. Of course she did. Mom, I have my own business now, my own clients, my own employees who depend on me. Surely it's not as stable as coming back to the family business. I looked around the kitchen I'd just finished, custom cabinets, high-end appliances, meticulous attention to detail. The client had already referred 2 friends to me. Actually, it's more stable. My clients choose to work with me because they value what I do, not because they're stuck with me. Isabella. I have to go, Mom. I have a client meeting in 20 minutes. I hung up and sat there for a moment, processing what I'd just heard. Sinclair Construction was failing, exactly as I'd predicted. Natalie's lack of experience was costing them clients and money, and now they wanted me to come back and fix their mistakes. A year ago, that call would have filled me with vindication and satisfaction. Instead, I felt nothing but relief that it wasn't my problem anymore. My client meeting was with the Henderson Group, the same Henderson Group that had just canceled their contract with Sinclair Construction. James Henderson had tracked me down through industry contacts after learning I'd left my family's business. Isabella, he said as we shook hands in his downtown office, I have to tell you, working with your replacement has been challenging. I kept my expression neutral. I'm sorry to hear that. She's charming, I'll give her that, great at presentations, but when it came time to actually manage the project, he shook his head. Cost overruns, schedule delays, communication breakdowns with subcontractors. We finally had to terminate the contract. He leaned forward across his desk. I'm hoping you might be interested in taking on the project yourself. It was a $2.3 million commercial renovation, the largest project I'd ever been offered as an independent contractor. 6 months ago, I would have been the project manager reporting to Natalie. Now, James Henderson was offering to make me the primary contractor. Mr. Henderson, I appreciate the offer, but that's a much larger project than I typically handle. I'd need to bring in additional staff, coordinate with multiple subcontractors. Isabella, I've worked with you on 3 projects over the past 5 years. I know exactly what you're capable of. The question is whether you're ready to scale up. I thought about my current team: Tom the electrician, Mike who just joined me as a foreman, Sarah who was handling my administrative work part-time. Could we handle something this big? More importantly, did I want to? Can I have 48 hours to put together a proposal? Take a week, he said. But Isabella, I want you to know you were the only person I called for this project. If you can't take it, I'll wait until you can. That evening, I sat in my apartment with spreadsheets and calculators, trying to figure out if I could make the numbers work. The Henderson project would require doubling my staff and taking on significant financial risk, but it would also establish Blueprint Construction as a major player in the commercial market. My phone rang, it was Mike. Isabella, I hope you don't mind me calling so late, but I heard through the grapevine that Henderson might be looking for a new contractor for their project. Where did you hear that? Tom's brother still works at Sinclair. Word is they're in real trouble, behind on multiple projects, hemorrhaging money, losing clients left and right. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, but again, it was different now. It wasn't fear or anxiety, it was concern for people I'd worked with for years, people who didn't deserve to suffer because of poor leadership. How bad is it? Bad enough that your dad's been calling everyone who left, trying to get people to come back. He offered me 20% more than I'm making with you. My heart sank. I couldn't compete with Sinclair's resources if they were determined to poach my employees. Are you thinking about going back? Mike laughed. Hell no. You know why? Because 20% more money isn't worth working for people who don't respect what you do. I'd rather make less and work for someone who values my expertise. After Mike hung up, I sat there thinking about respect and value, and what it meant to build something from nothing. Then I called James Henderson. Mr. Henderson, it's Isabella Sinclair. I've reviewed the project details, and I'd like to accept your offer. Blueprint Construction will take on the Henderson renovation. That's fantastic news. When can you start? I'll need 2 weeks to finalize staffing and logistics. But Mr. Henderson, I want to be completely transparent with you. This is the largest project my company has ever undertaken. I'm confident we can deliver quality work on time and on budget, but I want you to understand that we're scaling up specifically for this job. Isabella, you know what convinced me to offer you this contract? When we worked together on the Morrison project, there was a structural issue that could have cost everyone hundreds of thousands of dollars. You caught it, you solved it, and you made sure everyone understood what had gone wrong so it wouldn't happen again. That's the kind of contractor I want to work with. I remembered that project. I'd caught the error, fixed the problem, and my father had credited it to good teamwork without mentioning my name specifically. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I won't let you down. Over the next 2 weeks, I hired 6 new employees, including 2 project managers with commercial experience. I rented a larger office space and invested in better equipment. I was taking a significant financial risk, but for the first time in my career, I was making decisions based on my own judgment rather than seeking approval from people who'd never valued my expertise. The Henderson project broke ground on a Monday morning in November. I stood on the job site wearing my hard hat and steel-toed boots, watching my team begin the demolition phase, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: pure professional satisfaction. This was mine, my project, my team, my responsibility, my success or failure. I'd never been more terrified or more excited in my life. 3 months into the Henderson project, everything was going perfectly. We were ahead of schedule, under budget, and James Henderson had already asked me to bid on 2 additional projects. That's when my father showed up at the job site. I was reviewing electrical plans with Tom when I saw the familiar BMW pull up to the construction trailer. My father got out, looking older and more tired than I remembered, and walked toward me with the same determined expression he'd worn when he'd announced Natalie's promotion. "Isabella, we need to talk." I handed the plans back to Tom. "Give me a few minutes." We walked to a quiet corner of the site, away from the noise and activity. "Your mother said she called you a few months ago." "Oh, she did. And you said you weren't interested in coming back." "That's right." He looked around the job site, at my crew working efficiently, at the project timeline posted on the trailer wall showing us ahead of schedule, at the quality of work that was clearly visible even in the early stages. "Isabella, I came here to offer you something different, not equal partnership with Natalie. Full partnership, 50% ownership of Sinclair Construction." I stared at him. 6 months ago, this would have been everything I'd ever wanted. "What about Natalie?" She's learning, but she needs guidance. She needs someone with experience to help her." "She needs someone to fix her mistakes, you mean?" My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. "The business is in trouble, Isabella, real trouble. We're behind on projects, over budget. We've lost 3 major clients in the past 4 months. If we don't turn things around soon, you'll go under." "It's possible." I looked back at my own project, my own success, my own team of employees who'd chosen to work for me because they respected my leadership. "Dad, why should I give up what I've built to save a business that never valued what I could contribute?" "Because it's your legacy too. It's the family name." "The family name that you said I wasn't worthy to represent?" He flinched. "I was wrong about that. I can see that now." "What changed your mind?" A long pause. "Henderson Group called me last week. They wanted to know why we'd let you go. James Henderson told me you were the best project manager he'd ever worked with, and that losing you was the stupidest business decision he'd ever seen." James Henderson had said that about me. He also said, my father continued, that he'd tried to work with Natalie on good faith, but that she didn't have the first clue about actual construction management. His exact words were, "She's all style and no substance." I almost smiled at that. James Henderson was not known for diplomatic language. "Dad, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested." "Isabella, I've spent 15 years proving myself to you, and it was never enough. I'm not going to spend the next 15 years cleaning up someone else's mistakes while she gets credit for my work." "It wouldn't be like that. You'd be a full partner." "Under Natalie's leadership." He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "She's still CDO." "She's family, Isabella. I can't just." "I'm family too, Dad, but that never seemed to matter when it came to business decisions." I walked back toward the construction trailer, then turned around one more time. "Dad, when this business fails, and it will, don't blame Natalie. You set her up to fail by putting her in charge of something she wasn't qualified to handle. The person responsible for this disaster is you." He stood there in the dust and noise of my successful project and didn't say another word. That evening, I called my mother. "Mom, Dad came to see me today." I know, he told me. Isabella, please reconsider. I want you to understand something. I'm not refusing to help because I'm angry or vindictive. I'm refusing because I've built something good here, something that values my contributions, and I'm not going to abandon it to fix problems that were completely predictable and preventable. But we're family. Family doesn't treat people the way you treated me. Family doesn't dismiss 15 years of expertise and dedication. Family doesn't hand someone else credit for your work. We made mistakes. You made choices, and now you're living with the consequences of those choices. Isabella, what if the business fails? What if we lose everything? I closed my eyes, thinking about all the employees at Sinclair Construction who didn't deserve to suffer because of poor leadership decisions. Mom, I'll make you a deal. If Natalie admits she's not qualified to run a construction company and steps down, I'll consider consulting for you on a contract basis to help stabilize the business. But I won't work under her leadership, and I won't give up my own company to save yours. She'll never agree to that. Then you have your answer. 6 months later, Sinclair Construction filed for bankruptcy. I found out from a news article in the local business journal. Local construction company closes after 30 years in business. The article mentioned cost overruns, project delays, and client complaints. It quoted my father saying the company had faced unexpected market challenges. There was no mention of inexperienced leadership or preventable management failures. I called Sarah, who'd been with Sinclair until the very end. Isabella, it was so bad at the end, she told me. Projects months behind schedule, clients threatening to sue, subcontractors not getting paid. Natalie kept saying everything would work out, but she had no idea how to fix any of it. What about the employees? Are people finding other work? Most of us have landed somewhere. Mike's working for Henderson Group now. James Henderson hired him specifically because he'd worked with you. Tom started his own electrical contracting business. But Isabella. What? Your parents lost their house. They had to sell it to pay business debts. They're living in a small apartment now. And Natalie? She's moved back in with them. She can't find work in construction. Word got around about what happened at Sinclair. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also sadness for people who'd once meant everything to me. Are they okay? I mean financially. Your dad's doing some consulting work, but it's not much. Your mom got a part-time job at the library. There. Humbled, I guess you'd say. After I hung up with Sarah, I sat in my office, the larger space I'd moved to after landing 3 more major contracts, and thought about pride and consequences and the cost of being right. Blueprint Construction was thriving. We'd completed the Henderson project 2 weeks ahead of schedule and $50,000 under budget. James Henderson had become my biggest advocate, referring other major clients to me. I now had 15 employees and a 6-month waiting list for projects. More importantly, I had something I'd never had at Sinclair Construction: respect. My clients trusted my judgment. My employees valued my leadership. Industry colleagues sought my advice. But that evening, for the first time in months, I called my parents. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. Isabella. Hi, Mom. I heard about the business. I'm sorry. A long pause. Thank you. That means more than you know. Are you and Dad okay? We're managing. It's been an adjustment, but we're together and we're healthy. And Natalie. She's having a hard time. No one in the industry will hire her. They all know what happened at Sinclair. I closed my eyes. Whatever my feelings about Natalie, she didn't deserve to be unemployable at 28. Mom, would you like to have dinner sometime? All of you, I mean. You'd want to see us after everything. You're still my family. 2 weeks later, we met at a modest restaurant downtown. Nothing like the expensive places my parents used to prefer, but somewhere comfortable and neutral. They looked different. Older, obviously, but also smaller somehow. My father had lost the commanding presence that had intimidated me for so many years. My mother seemed genuinely fragile for the first time I could remember. And Natalie looked lost, uncertain in a way that was completely unfamiliar. Isabella, my father said after we'd ordered, I need to say something. I was wrong. Not just about the business decisions, but about you. About your abilities, your worth, your contributions. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. I spent 30 years building that company, and I was so proud of it that I couldn't see past my own ego. I wanted to believe that success came from charisma and vision, not from the day-to-day work that you were doing. It was easier to credit the glamorous stuff than to acknowledge that the real value was in the technical expertise I'd always taken for granted. Dad, let me finish. I set Natalie up to fail. I set you up to leave. And I destroyed something that 3 generations of our family had built because I couldn't admit that my idea of leadership was wrong. Natalie spoke up for the first time. Bella, I need to apologize too. I knew I wasn't qualified. Deep down, I knew it. But I wanted so badly to be important, to be the successful daughter, that I convinced myself I could figure it out as I went along. She took a shaky breath. I cost people their jobs. I ruined the family legacy. And worst of all, I treated you like you were in my way when you were the only person who could have saved us. I looked around the table at these 3 people who had shaped my entire life, who had hurt me deeply, and who were now genuinely trying to make amends. I appreciate the apologies, I said carefully, but apologies don't undo the damage. We know that, my mother said quietly. We're not asking for forgiveness or for you to fix our problems. We just wanted you to know that we finally understand what we lost. What you threw away, I corrected gently. What we threw away, my father agreed. We talked for 2 hours, not about business or money or the past, but about small things. My mother's new job at the library, which she actually enjoyed. My father's consulting work with small contractors, where his experience was valued even if his ego had to take a backseat. Natalie's plan to go back to school for teaching, a career that might actually suit her social skills. And they asked about my business, really asked with genuine interest and respect. 15 employees, my mother said, sounding amazed. Isabella, that's incredible. The Henderson Group is your biggest client? My father asked. James Henderson told me you're the best contractor he's ever worked with. You're being featured in Construction Today magazine? Natalie added. Bella, that's huge. For the first time in my life, my family was celebrating my success instead of minimizing it. As we prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside. Isabella, I want you to know I'm proud of you. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for how you've handled this whole situation. You had every right to be vindictive, to kick us when we were down. Instead, you've been gracious and professional. That says more about your character than anything else. I hugged him, this man who dismissed my worth for so many years, and who now finally understood what he'd lost. 3 months later, Natalie started her teaching credential program. She sent me a text on her first day. Thank you for showing me what it looks like to find work that actually fits who you are. I should have been a teacher all along. 6 months later, my father started referring small projects to Blueprint Construction, jobs that were too small for the larger firms, but perfect for someone building a reputation for quality and reliability. A year later, my mother organized a family dinner to celebrate Blueprint Construction's 2nd anniversary. She'd researched the industry awards I'd won, the articles that had been written about my business, the clients who'd praised my work. For the first time in my life, she knew the details of my professional achievements. Isabella, she said, raising her glass of wine, to the daughter who built something beautiful from nothing, who showed us what real leadership looks like, and who had every reason to write us off but chose grace instead. We toasted, and I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so successful, so undeniably valuable, that the people who dismissed you have no choice but to see their own failures clearly. But the real victory wasn't in their recognition. It was in the fact that I no longer needed it. Blueprint Construction continued to grow. We expanded into commercial renovation, historic preservation, and sustainable building practices. I hired more employees, including several former Sinclair workers who brought their expertise to a company that valued what they knew. 2 years after Sinclair Construction closed, I received an unexpected phone call. Isabella, this is Marcus Webb from Construction Industry Weekly. I'm working on a story about family businesses in construction, and I'd love to include your perspective. What kind of perspective? Well, you have a unique story, someone who left a family business to start their own company, and whose success contrasted sharply with the family business's failure. Our readers are interested in the lessons learned. I thought about it carefully. The story was public record, Sinclair's bankruptcy, Blueprint's success, the industry connections between them. But I'd never spoken publicly about the family dynamics that led to my departure. Mr. Webb, I'm willing to talk, but I want to focus on business lessons, not personal family drama. Absolutely. We're interested in the professional side, what you learned about leadership, about valuing technical expertise, about building sustainable business practices. The interview lasted 2 hours. I talked about the importance of understanding every aspect of your business, about treating employees as experts rather than replaceable workers, about the difference between charismatic leadership and effective management. I talked about the mistakes I'd seen at Sinclair, promoting based on personality rather than competence, dismissing the technical work that actually created value, prioritizing image over substance. And I talked about the principles that guided Blueprint Construction: transparency with clients, respect for expertise, sustainable growth based on quality rather than volume. When the article came out 3 months later, it was featured on the cover with the headline, Building Success: How Isabella Sinclair Created Industry Excellence After Family Business Failure. The article was fair and professional, focusing on business lessons rather than personal drama. But the implications were clear. I'd left a failing family business and built something more successful on my own. The response was immediate and overwhelming. I received calls from construction companies wanting to hire me as a consultant, from business schools wanting me to speak to their students, from industry organizations offering board positions. But the call that mattered most came from James Henderson. Isabella, I just read the Construction Industry Weekly article. I want to offer you something. What's that? Henderson Group is expanding into the Northwest. We need a regional construction partner, someone who can manage large commercial projects with the same attention to detail and quality control that you've brought to our work here. He paused. It would mean expanding Blueprint Construction significantly. We're talking about a 5-year partnership worth approximately $50 million in contracts. $50 million. It was more money than Sinclair Construction had made in its best decade. Mr. Henderson, that's incredibly generous, but that level of expansion would require. I know exactly what it would require: additional staff, larger facilities, bonding capacity, equipment investment. Henderson Group is prepared to provide financing and guarantees to help you scale appropriately. I sat there processing what he just offered me: the chance to build Blueprint Construction into a major regional player, with the backing of one of the most respected development companies in the country. There's one condition, he continued. I want you to teach a master class for our industry partners about construction management and quality control. Share what you've learned about building successful projects and sustainable business practices. You want me to teach other contractors? Isabella, you've proven that technical expertise combined with ethical business practices creates superior results. That's knowledge worth sharing. 6 months later, I stood in front of an audience of 200 construction professionals, including several former Sinclair employees, and delivered my first industry presentation: Building on Solid Ground, the Foundation of Sustainable Success. I talked about my journey from overlooked family employee to independent business owner. I discussed the importance of valuing technical expertise, respecting employee knowledge, and building client relationships based on competence rather than charm. And I shared the most important lesson I'd learned: your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see your value. If you know what you bring to the table, and you're willing to prove it through consistent quality work, the right opportunities will find you. After the presentation, a young woman approached me, probably mid-20s, wearing a hard hat and work boots. Ms. Sinclair, I'm Jennifer Chen. I work for my family's plumbing business, but they keep telling me I'm not cut out for leadership. Your story gives me hope that I can prove them wrong. I looked at her eager face, her obvious competence, her determination despite being dismissed by people who should support her. Jennifer, let me give you some advice. Don't spend years trying to prove your worth to people who are determined not to see it. Build something that demonstrates your value so clearly that recognition becomes inevitable. She nodded, taking notes in a small notebook. And Jennifer, when you do build something successful, remember that the goal isn't revenge. It's freedom, the freedom to work with people who value what you bring to the table. 5 years after leaving Sinclair Construction, Blueprint Construction employed 45 people across 2 states and had a backlog of contracts worth $75 million. I'd been featured in 3 major industry publications, served on 2 professional boards, and spoken at construction conferences across the country. But the measurement of success that mattered most to me was much simpler. Every single one of my employees felt valued for their expertise. Every client trusted my judgment. Every project was completed with the quality and integrity that I'd always known was possible. I'd built something that reflected my values, not someone else's vision of who I should be. The final conversation with my family came on a Saturday afternoon in spring. We were having dinner at my parents' small apartment, the first time I'd visited their new home. Isabella, my father said as my mother served coffee, I want you to know how proud we are of what you've built. I looked around their modest living room, decorated with photos that now included pictures of my business achievements alongside Natalie's teaching awards. Thank you, Dad. I've been following your career in the trade publications, the Henderson Partnership, the industry recognition, the speaking engagements. You've become exactly the kind of leader I always thought I was. Dad, let me finish. You've become exactly the kind of leader I should have recognized you were 15 years ago. I was so focused on what I thought leadership looked like that I completely missed the real thing happening right in front of me. Natalie, now in her second year of teaching, spoke up. Bella, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret leaving Sinclair? I thought about it carefully. I regret that it took me so long to leave. I wasted years trying to prove myself to people who were determined not to see my value. I should have trusted my own judgment and built something of my own much sooner. But you stayed for 15 years, my mother observed. Why? Because I thought family loyalty meant accepting whatever role you assigned me. I thought love meant being grateful for scraps of recognition. It took me way too long to learn that real family, real love, supports your success instead of diminishing it. My father reached across the table and took my hand. Isabella, we failed you as family and as business partners. But watching you succeed on your own terms, seeing the leader you've become, the business you've built, the respect you've earned, I understand now what we lost when we lost you. You didn't lose me, Dad. You pushed me to find myself. And what did you find? I smiled, thinking about the young woman who'd spent 15 years trying to earn approval from people who couldn't see her worth, and the business owner who now woke up every morning excited about the work she'd chosen to do. I found out that I didn't need anyone's permission to be successful. I just needed to stop asking for it. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the journey from invisible family employee to respected industry leader. The transformation hadn't been about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It had been about finally seeing myself clearly and building a life that reflected my actual value. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Chen, the young woman I'd met at my industry presentation. Ms. Sinclair, I wanted to let you know, I just opened my own plumbing contracting business. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the best way to prove your worth is to stop trying to prove it to the wrong people. I smiled and texted back, Congratulations, Jennifer. Now go build something amazing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming so successful, so fulfilled, so undeniably valuable that the people who dismissed you have no choice but to recognize what they lost. But the real victory is realizing you don't need their recognition anymore. You already know who you are. Thank you for joining me on this journey from overlooked family employee to independent business success. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about a time when you had to choose between seeking approval and building something of your own. Drop a comment below, your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If you believe that everyone deserves to work in an environment where their expertise is valued, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to stay invisible. Remember, your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. You don't need permission to be successful, you just need to stop asking for it. Until next time, this is Isabella reminding you to know your worth, trust your expertise, and never let anyone convince you to stay small.